BBC Hooniverse.
You're watching the TGM production.
Hello and welcome back to the Blue Box Files. Yes, this is in the early stages of the year. Yes, we're back, which means only one thing. No, I've got nothing else to do. No, it means I've got another wonderful interview and more bad jokes, as you've already heard to begin with. So let's crack on with our very special guest. He's best known for running one of the top 10 best companies within the world of fan Doctor Who and within the world of Doctor Who itself. It's the one and only Keith Barnfather.
Well, I can honestly say I've never had an intro like that before, Tom.
So we shall start at the very beginning because Julie Andrews once said it was a good place to start. And I'll be honest, she's not wrong so far. There is still time. How did you get to the wonderful world I like to call the media industry?
I think most people can call it that as well, not just you. Well, briefly, I didn't really know what I wanted to do as I grew up. A lot of us don't know. I think it's not an unusual trait. And I was working, doing my O levels, doing my A levels. Didn't really care when I got to my A levels. Failed 2 out of 3. Potted around a bit, and at the time I was heavily into Doctor Who fandom, but I thought I I just hadn't connected that being a living, shall we say,
Yeah,
working within the business being a living. And it wasn't until to one of the people that I worked with at the fandom at the time, Jan Vincent Rudsky, who was the president of the DWAS when it first started. He went to work at the BBC, and I thought at the time it was perhaps a mistake, not for him,
yeah,
but you shouldn't really combine your what I thought was my private passion,
yeah,
shall we call it, my hobby,
yeah,
with work. But I sort of bummed around for 6 months working in just doing clerical work, and eventually thought to myself, well, at least I can be near what I love if
yeah,
I can get a job at the BBC. And I got a job in something called Central Services at the BBC when I was about, I suppose I was about 19, 18, 19 or 19, maybe 20. And I went to work for the BBC, eventually got into engineering the videotape library. So I was involved with the sort of general overall
yeah,
production work of television, although I wasn't working in the making side of it.
yeah,
Spent a few years there, finally got a chance to move on to Channel 4 when Channel 4 began in 1982. Went to Channel 4 and started doing small production work with them and just realized that was what I wanted to do for a living. And
yeah,
in 84, I left and formed Real Time.
yeah.
That's the shortened version.
Yeah, yeah. And when you say that you're not too sure if you should merge your passion with the with your work, it you can sort of understand because not everyone. It's sort of like it might consume them slightly. They might get a little bit starry-eyed with the idea of it's my favorite thing, and they might lose the sight of the actual job. But I think that a lot of not just Doctor Who fans, but a lot of fans of TV in general, sort of, I think working at the BBC or working at the area where their show's produced is still sort of still connects to their love because they can then talk to Jeff down the corridor and he might be also into it. And then you form connection within that world and you can sort of then produce or if you get into wherever you get to in the corporation, make stuff that's in the vein of that. And I think that it makes sense because the BBC is and was at the time the big deal. And I think that what I find interesting about whenever people talk about, oh, I worked at the BBC and blah, 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 is when they name people, because it just sounds like he's from another world. They always sound, oh yeah, Keith. Keith used to work at blah, 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 and it's like another world. And that's why those documentaries you see on TV are just incredible because it's like Jane saying she worked with Jeff, who was the line producer of and I think that's incredible. But where was the origin of your love of Doctor Who? Where did this joy of this silly alien in a blue box begin?
Oh, right back as a child. I mean, I think all of us who are fans of anything, I mean, obviously we're talking about Doctor Who, but I think
Yeah,
of all of us as we grew up, whatever our passion is.
yeah,
I mean, I think what I admire most in people is when they have a passion.
yeah,
I get very upset. I don't get upset, but I find it sad when you meet people who've never found that. They've
yeah,
never found their passion, their personal passion.
mm,
It could be many things. It can be their partner, it can be their family,
yeah,
it can be hobbies. But when you see that fire in somebody, that to me is what makes people interesting.
mm,
And I was lucky, I didn't plan for it. I only found the love once I'd actually started working in television.
yeah,
And I've often said once I left Channel 4, I haven't worked for over 42 years. I have been lucky enough with the help of fans, as well as the business and corporate and television work that I've done,
yeah,
that's really earned me a living.
yeah,
I've also been able to live my fantasies because of the support that I've had from fans for that time. And I've always said how grateful it's, I've always said it's our success, not just
yeah.
mine.
Yeah, and what's interesting, not just the origins of real time, but just that period in general, is how much of fans worked in that space, but not just like the fans are doing now, where it's like there's probably less money put into like some stuff on YouTube. It's still incredible, but it's probably not as much money as there was in the 90s. When you watch the stuff in the 90s, it feels a lot like traditional TV. And where was the origins of real time in the first place?
Well, I went to Channel 4, and I was working at Channel 4. I moved up from, I was in the VT library there, videotape library there. I actually set it up. That's what I was employed to do. But I then got headhunted
Yeah,
basically by what they called business development, which was their version of BBC Enterprises.
yeah,
And I worked there, and that's when I really started getting into production work. But I also learned a lot about rights. I learned about copyright. I learned
yeah,
about exploitation. And I also learned about how a lot of small production companies were being exploited by Channel 4. Not, I don't mean that in a, what can I say? I'm not trying to disc Channel 4,
yeah,
but what Channel 4 did was obviously commission at very, very, very good prices for them from small producers because small producers were desperate to work in television.
yeah,
And they pretty much stitched them up on rights. So Channel 4 would get the rights for distribution, take them away from the small producers, which means essentially, as a small production company, you get your money for making something, but after that, you haven't got anything that has earned you something as a portfolio,
yeah,
as an income for life. All production companies would get a royalty, but frankly, very rarely did they ever see any royalties.
yeah,
Sometimes, but it wasn't a lot. Good for Channel 4 because they amassed a huge back catalogue, but bad for small producers. So one of the things when I realized I wanted to go out on my own,
mm,
I was acutely aware of is I wanted to do things that I could retain the rights to,
yeah,
so that slowly real time would build up a catalogue. Um, that doesn't apply when you make corporate and business television because there is no need for it after it's
yeah,
made. It's a very short period of exploitation and then it's history.
yeah,
There's nothing you can do with it. But obviously, I was aware that there would be, although I didn't realize how much of a legacy there would be, that came later.
yeah,
I did realize that if I made anything myself, and I made sure that, real time retained the copyright, that would build a portfolio with the cold TV work that I would do.
yeah,
And that's really what started it off. It was leaving to start making professional productions and also to be able to indulge my other great love,
yeah.
which I've been lucky enough to do.
Yeah, and one thing that I think that you're sort of famed for in the giant sense of is what makes your production so incredible is the fact that in some frame you have some of the original cast in it, or you have some of the original characters, and I think that gives it the credibility of going, wow, that makes it even better because it's like even if you didn't have the licensed actors on the character, it still would be incredible because the scripts are immaculate anyway. But having those characters in there just says this is the next level. This is like next up. And one of the ones you've worked on more recently, in the last few years, and that I adore on many different levels, not just because the behind the scenes on the DVD was both hilarious and interesting, but also the production itself gave a new avenue to a character that we hadn't seen on, let's say, screen or whatever rectangular box anyone's watching it on. But what was it like working on Syl, the Devil of Andor or Ardor?
You mean Tilling the Devil Seeds of Arador?
Yes,
Sounds better that way, doesn't it?
yeah,
Um, well, that was that came about serendipity in a way. I mean, I actually had another production in mind that I'd actually already commissioned the script for.
yeah,
And funnily enough, that's the one I now am trying to get together to make soon,
yeah,
probably the next couple of years. Um, but we were re-releasing the Mythmakers interviews in compilation form in a
mm,
series called The Doctors in the
yeah,
High Street through a company called Kosh. And it was fine at the beginning because I had loads of interviews with people from Pertwee and Baker and Troughton. But I was beginning to run out of interviews that I could make into these compilations for Colin Baker and for Sylvester McCoy.
yeah,
So in the last few years of well, I can't remember the exact years, but say about 5 or 6 years ago,
mm,
um, I was deliberately going out to do interviews with people to make those gaps fill so
yeah,
that I could then release a Doctor's compilation. And obviously, Nabil was one of those people from the Colin Baker time that I was looking at, and we put him out on, I think, one of the Monsters compilations because
yeah,
we wanted to make two. And I met Nabil, and we did his Myth Makers, and I really had a great time with him and his wife. A tragic loss, and he's very missed by all those who knew him. He was a larger than life character, and we we hit it off. We just got on so well with each other, and I came away from it. I actually asked him before I left. I interviewed him at his home in Ireland. And before I left, I asked him and Marcella, his wife, would if I could, because I actually realized while I was there, and the brain works in certain ways,
yeah,
and I thought, oh, it'd be lovely to work with Nabil, playing Syl, but I couldn't do it. Hang on. Philip Newman owns Philip, not Philip Newman, sorry. Oh, what's the end? My brain's gone. The creator of Seal,
yeah,
whatever. I'm so sorry. I'm thinking of the designer of the set. It'll come back. Edit.
yeah, yeah,
Anyway, the writer owned the character. This I knew. So I thought, okay. Well, then, if the writer owns the character, there is a possibility we could do something.
yeah,
So I came away had with that in the back of my mind, and when I contacted the writer. He was really, really, really keen on the idea, and it developed from there. And what I loved about it more than anything else was, um, and this is something we've done with real time, is what we've liked to do is take characters from Doctor Who that perhaps hadn't been able to be developed as
yeah,
people, because obviously they're not ciphers, but they are supporting characters, and they never really ever get the chance to blossom completely in their own right, which is one of the reasons I love doing Downtime, because we got the chance to do that for the Brigadier.
yeah,
And what this gave Syl, as in Nabil, was the chance to actually star, to
yeah.
be the lead character. And boy, did he do a great job of that. And I think the script was utterly incredible as well. You know,
And I think that it represents, and this is a lot of thing that fans
Philip
do.
Martin. If I didn't say Philip
Yeah,
Martin, it was Philip Martin.
yeah.
I'm so sorry.
That's right. And I think that what fans do incredibly well, and that's not including myself. I'm accepting myself from this statement because that would just be narcissism at its best. But fans are very good at saying, well, yes, I like Doctor Who, but I really like that character, and I want to make him the star. I want to utilize that character more because there is elements in Doctor Who where you could see the characters need developing. So in my case, I have my own version of the Dream Lord, my own fan series, because I thought that even though Toby Jones did an excellent job, I just think the Dream Lord could exist further on. And so other fans do similar things. And I think that what really works for Silly is that it's a character that needed that development that I think that works really well now. It worked really well then, but I think it works extremely well now, and I think that that's what makes it more incredible. And what's even more, it's a funny image, shall we say? The greatest image of all time in the world of Doctor Who is Jeremy Corbyn holding a copy of the DVD. I do think that's incredible for many
And
reasons.
it's not AI and
No.
it's not Paintbox. He actually was given a copy. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know, I know,
It's the
I know.
story's more heartwarming than you think, but if you remove the story from why how that happened, just have the
Yeah.
image on its own without the context, it makes it funnier because it looks like he's been ambushed by it because it doesn't look like he's
No.
genuinely wanted to, but the whole story is heartwarming and nice and it's a much more it's one of those type of stories. But you
The
did
moment I saw the photograph on, I think I saw it on Facebook first of
yeah
all, I whacked off a message to Nabil and said, "This isn't real, is it? You are, aren't you? You didn't really." And he went, "Nope, it's totally genuine." And he
yeah.
explained what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and so when you see something like that occur, and the people that are unaware of what that is and know that character and then go out and look for it, what are the things that occurred within recent Who history? I've read that it happened by accident, but I don't believe that it was an accident, due to the fact that it's such a coincidence that it's unmissable to be an accident. But when you found that Kate Lethbridge Stewart had been put
Yeah.
into Doctor Who,
Yeah.
and I generally think that it's impossible for it to be an accident due to Stephen Moffat, the type of person he is. I highly doubt it's an accident. But when you found out that was happening, were you sort of surprised, or were you prior no once they'd worked
No,
out
I
if
know
it
what
was an
you're.
accident, but
Yeah.
once they'd
Yeah.
worked out that there was a link, were you prior knowledge? Were you known beforehand so that you could give any information about what you've done with the character?
Well, I mean, the first thing one has to bear in mind is I don't, no, I all conjecture, but what I would say is I don't think there was any intent on any part by anybody to breach any copyright. I mean, I've obviously at many times during running real time have in the BBC's eyes, perhaps
Yeah,
pushed the envelope a bit, done things that they felt I was not really allowed to do by
yeah,
copyright. And we've had conversations, I've had meetings over the years. They've always been very good about it.
yeah,
They've never threatened me, never done anything that, I would feel was unfair. I mean, obviously what you do have at the BBC, which is one of their biggest problems, is you have a turnover of staff, legal
yeah,
staff, within a cyclic period. So one person doesn't know what somebody else has discussed with you. And that can be difficult at times, but
yeah,
I appreciate that. That's just the way it is. Um, I I would suspect, and this is just my conjecture, that Stephen probably had assumed
yeah,
that all the characters in Downtime who were known
yeah,
were probably BBC copyright because we had the Brigadier, all right, not BBC, but licensed by the
yeah, yeah,
BBC.
yeah,
The Yeti, the Professor, all these were
yeah,
production, all people and characters that were in Doctor Who and who the BBC had licensed in the past. Um, and of course, some characters were copyright, which the BBC were generous enough to allow us to use.
yeah,
We used BBC visual effects, we used BBC costume in
yeah,
Downtime. And I think it was just a natural assumption that the character of Kate was BBC copyright.
yeah,
Um, Obviously, she wasn't because she was created by me and Mark Platt for
yeah,
the program, for Downtime. And when it came about that they used Kate, Mark and I had a conversation, and we contacted the BBC, and we basically came to an amicable agreement over the fact that the copyright was not going to be an issue.
yeah,
Um, I mean, the next production that I want to do, Anomaly, which really has been sitting on the back burner for a long time now, and apologies to all of you that want to see it or are just irritated that it hasn't been made. You know me, I do my best, but I have got a life. Amazingly.
yeah,
That is going to be the production from real time's point of view that will explain why there were essentially two Kate Lethbridge Stewarts. And
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. But you know, the bottom line with it all is I would never ever do anything that I felt would damage Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Why would I? What, you know, it's given me joy.
Yeah.
It's made me successful in many ways, and I owe the BBC a lot. So as far as I'm concerned, it's an issue that's been dealt with, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah. And I think that
And
when,
of course, in the end, it's a great
yeah,
compliment. It's a
yeah,
massive compliment to
it
real
is.
time
It is.
that they did.
Yeah, and that's the thing that what makes it incredible, right? From my point of view, and I think a lot of people will agree, is that the moment you see Kate Lethbridge Stewart appear in Doctor Who, in the main series, shall we say, and the moment you then find the connections, and then you realise very quickly, I don't know if you would agree because every fan has their own opinion on this, but I would then say that Downtime's canon. I would say in my version of what canon is, apparently everyone's got their own opinion. I'm not going to say who's wrong here, but I think then Downtime becomes canon. Obviously, having Downtime novelized automatically in most people's eyes makes it canon because if you've got an official piece of Doctor, it turns into a book because why would you not want to read an extended version of something you love? But I think that it showcases a compliment, and B, it showcases that it was a character worth having. Because if you look at very briefly in the war between the land and the sea, the world's longest title of a spin-off, you can sort of make further connections because even though they might not reference some of the elements from Downtime, they've referenced other elements so that if you piece together that Kate Lethbridge had multiple children, then you can find that connection. And then if you look at Tidy's Wiki, because people have got a lot of time on their hands, then generated the character.
I haven't.
I don't know who does that. I don't know who does that, but it's in incredible detail, and you can
Mm,
generate where, at what point, in what version of the story did she
yeah,
have this other child that's mentioned in that to
yeah.
corroborate with the other child that's in Downtime as a hit and monitor. But one of the things that's happened, I don't know when it happened, but I noticed it towards the end of last year, or early this year, I think. But when Downtime went to Amazon Prime,
Mm.
that another did that showcase to you that that was a significant production within real time to say the people enjoyed it so much that people are willing to watch it over and over again on Amazon Prime? Because when I found it on Amazon Prime, I made sure I shared that like a bullet train.
Well, I mean, not wishing to get into rights and stuff, but you know, we had a lot of stuff go out on download through not I think through Amazon. I can't quite remember
Yeah,
because we weren't doing the distribution, but the Doctors was put out through BBC outlets and through a number of outlets for a while.
yeah,
In fact, we never really ever saw any royalties from it. Downtime has been we didn't sell the rights, but we licensed it to a
yeah,
distribution company about 15 years ago, and they've put it out on Amazon. They're the ones that
yeah,
did that. Going back to your point about canon, if I said that doesn't bother me, that isn't quite what I mean. What I mean is I think everybody has to make their own decision, and I have no problem with that. I don't make anything for real time that I think this is canon. You know, any drama that we've done is for people to make their own decision. You know, wartime we thought developed the character of Benton. It's up to everybody out there who bought it or who's watched it to decide whether it's something they wish to believe. I think what I would perhaps take issue with is people who think that they need to convince you
yeah,
whether it's canon or not. It's not up to them.
yeah,
It's up to you. Everybody out there who buys anything, you know, that is not made by the BBC, it's up to them to decide
yeah,
is it canon. You know, is Big Finish canon?
yeah,
You know, I mean, obviously it's officially licensed. Do you define everything as officially licensed? Everything we've done is officially licensed, but not by the BBC.
yeah,
I don't think it matters. I think what matters is what everybody who watches it wants. If
yeah,
you want to watch it, think it's a bit of fun and not canon, fine. If you want to watch it and consider it as part of the history of Doctor Who, also great. But I think in the end, it's down to individual choice. And what we shouldn't do is be banging each other on the head about
Yeah.
what we think it should be.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important thing to look at is that people might say, oh, you have to watch this to do da 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 da, da, and it's all, as you say, it's a personal opinion. But I think that it showcases, because there's a lot of discussion about whether or not downtime's canon or whatever, and people have their own opinion. It showcases that it was excellent enough for enough people to go, whoa, we really need to take this seriously, and that showcases not only that it was brilliant, but only it stands the test of time. And
Mm.
and I think that it's when you think of key points in Doctor Who's history, especially in the period pre TV film and after TV film before 2005, I can say for definite that if I think of productions that were made in that time, downtime in my first thought, because it showcases that it was really interesting. Another one that you've done that I think is really interesting because in the world that in the stuff I'm doing at the moment, it's sort of really ironically relevant because it justifies a point I've been trying to harbour this entire time that this type of way of telling a story is still relevant and is still viewable to the audience. But what was it like working on The White Witch of Devil's End?
Oh, wow. I mean, I've loved doing everything that I mean, again, I'm so privileged and lucky,
Yeah,
and I know how lucky I've been. Working with John Levine, taking a chance all the way back in 80, Frozen to Death when we did wartime, right through to working with Nabil. But it was something with all respect to everybody else I've worked with, and I've been, as I say, very lucky.
yeah,
Damaris was special. I miss her every day. I mean, she was an absolute treasure. Anastasia and I, because she almost became like a surrogate, not mother, but auntie,
yeah,
let's say,
yeah,
I mean, we went up, Anastasia and I went up to her home to record her Mythmakers, and just had a wonderful time with her. Such a generous, kind woman, very opinionated,
yeah,
knew her own way, never
yeah,
crossed Damaris, but a
yeah,
genuinely kind
yeah,
human being. And she was of an age then, and we're just chatting. And again, I can't help it. I came away, Anastasia and I came away after we'd have done the interview, and we both just looked at each other and said, "Wow, what a
yeah,
person, what a human being."
yeah,
I just said to God, it'd be lovely to work with her, wouldn't it?
yeah,
Wouldn't it be good to work with her? Could we work with her? And the next thing goes, right, well, hang on. So her character was, who wrote that? Ah, yes, now we could do something. That obviously
yeah,
started it off. But then you start thinking, even then, Damaris couldn't move. She really couldn't move
yeah,
very well. She could hardly walk. So the next thought was, well, I mean, how could we do this? And it was Anastasia's idea to shoot it as her telling a story,
yeah,
like here,
yeah,
sitting, talking to you
yeah,
and telling the stories. And of course, the thing I loved about that right from that moment was she's good at telling stories and her voice is so rich and
yeah,
so I still think she's with us. Her voice is so rich and
yeah,
so in, pulls you in, so
mm,
encompassing,
yeah,
fills the screen, that I thought, yes, she could do that. So we got back to her first and said, could work this out, if we could make this happen, would you do it? And she just said, absolutely. And she had this lovely expression that I always remember and I use every once in a while. She said, you do that thing. And that's what we did. We went out,
yeah,
cleared the rights, worked out how we were going to do it, went for a week with a lovely sound and auto cue lady called Jamie He, who came down with us. And Anastasia was heavily pregnant at the time with our son Harry.
yeah,
And we spent, I would call it a blissful week,
yeah,
each day filming one of the stories that were written
yeah,
by David Howe and his wife Samantha,
mm,
who both can write and did a wonderful job on the stories, and 4 or 5 of their other friends who
yeah,
wrote the 6 stories. They did a brilliant job. All of them did. And Sam did a great job editing it with David. Each story had a different flavor because it was written by a different person.
Yeah.
But what we came out with at the end of it, when we'd finished it, and I've said this many times, so if any of you are going to sleep, I understand it, was we came out with an edit that was 3 times, 4 times longer than I expected. My brief to David and Sam was I wanted a 50-minute production where
Yeah.
each of the 6 stories would last maybe 7 or 8 minutes, 10 minutes maximum,
Yeah.
because I thought we needed to keep it moving if she was just talking to camera.
Mm.
But when I mean, the thing is, and this comes down to experience, and they would never make this mistake again. And I'm not
Yeah.
blaming them at all, but they read it, but they didn't read it the way an actor would read it.
Yeah.
I have to say, I was so busy, I didn't either. So I didn't time it. If I'd have timed it, I'd have probably come out with it longer as well,
Mm.
but not as long as it turned out
Yeah.
in the end. But the problem with that was, I'm trying to sort of do the game plan here, is
Yeah.
it meant that each of the episodes, because they were then turning into, they were going to be segments, but then to me
Yeah.
they became episodes with like 22 minutes.
Wow.
And you can imagine where the brain's going. I said to Anastasia, well, what are we going to do? It's going to be too long. Nobody is going to have the attention span to watch, I don't know what it was, nearly 2 hours of drama in
Wow.
one complete edit. And it came between us. We just sort of went, well, why don't we split it into episodes?
Yeah.
And the problem with sort of it then was we have to shoot cutaways. We
Yeah.
can't just have her talking to camera for 6 20-minute episodes, even though we've broken them into episodes. So we had to shelve it for about a year and a half, 2 years. We took Damaris to Aldbourne to shoot one little section for one story. And it was split over two, actually, I think, in the end. One scene where she actually was in Aldbourne, so we could place her in Devil's End,
Yeah.
which we thought was essential in the last episode. And we just wrote things from, again, this was Anastasia's suggestion of shooting it from her point of view, because that removed the problem of trying to find somebody who could look like Olive Hawthorne through her entire life. There's no way we could have afforded that.
Yeah.
So we had to shoot. So what we did was we shot the whole of the narrative when we were doing it. And of course, it worked with her talking to camera of her point of view. I mean, obviously, we had to cut corners at times. I wish I'd had twice, 3 times, 4 times the budget. But I think we managed it. I'm incredibly proud of it. I know I showed the first and the last episode to her and a good friend of hers, Ian Burgess. We both met up there at her home and showed it to her. And the last episode had her and Ian in tears.
Ah.
And she was just
That's lovely.
so happy that she'd
Yeah.
done, you know.
Yeah.
And then she won an award for it. In fact, she
Wow.
won 2 awards. She said, I've never won an award in my life.
Yeah.
So I got them to send her the award so that she had a copy of the award as well. And
Wow.
I know what that meant to her.
Yeah, and what I think is really important to put across in drama, and this is what I've been trying to get clear the last few months actually, but is that I would say a monologue, but mainly famous by the Alan Bennett, which is my
Oh, yes. Yes,
which is my
talking heads.
prime example, because that's the example that will recognize in people's heads. But I think that yes, you might not think that a lot happens, right? Because you're hearing the story from the point of view, but it's still an important piece in drama. So it's like, for example, in like, let's say, a talking heads, you sort of have Patricia Routledge, for example, in different rooms, or she might be in the prison cell, and that is still engaging. Or you have like Maggie Smith looking really depressed, that kind of thing. But the point is that talking heads and monologues in general really do work in drama, not just on stage, but on TV. And I think having cutaways I think it sort of like evolves the format, if you will. So it's not only just telling a story, it's also adding new elements to it. It puts the format on its head and spins it like a basketball on your finger, which is difficult to do. I can't do it.
Take your word for it. Never tried.
Neither have I. But it's that type of thing that people don't really take seriously, and I think they should. And I think this is that's a prime example of when it works. And do you think that having it as a monologue would make the story better than if you would ha had it as a traditional
You
non-monologue
know,
drama.
I would honestly say I can't answer that question because it was never planned that way. It was
Yeah,
always planned as a monologue. Do I like the format? Yes. Would I do it again? Possibly, but it would require the right actor and it would require the right character. Um, I mean, I think one thing I've always done in life is allow life to lead me in
yeah,
in a good way rather than fighting things. Anastasia believes greatly that everything happens for a reason, and I frankly agree with her. And I think sometimes you need to accept where something's going,
yeah,
and this just went in a certain way. It was meant to be, and it makes it unique because we just let it evolve.
yeah,
I'm not. I hope I'm not sounding pompous because it is a very, very inexpensive drama, made on a shoestring budget, but I do think it has worth. And the fact that it's won, as I say, it won an award at the Monologue, International Monologue, and I can't remember the other word they had, but it's a film festival.
yeah,
And it won
yeah,
because it was original and it was different.
yeah,
And it's won a couple of science fiction film festivals as well. It's it's it has merit.
yeah,
I think most things we've done have merit. They
yeah,
have a reason to exist.
yeah,
I think they have enriched the world of
yeah,
Doctor Who. I certainly think during the wilderness years, when when there, as we all call it, but it
yeah,
wasn't. We had some of the richest drama being produced by Virgin Books
yeah,
and a little bit by BBC Books as well near the end. But
yeah,
Virgin kept Doctor Who alive, Doctor Who magazine, Bill Baggs, us. There was so much going on during that time because fans had to basically entertain themselves. Um,
yeah,
it was a wonderful period, and I think I do know that some people sort of think fan produced. I mean, Real Time's not really a fan production company. We do everything officially, we do everything licensed, and we have budgets, and everybody normally gets paid, even if it's a small amount of money.
yeah,
Um, but it was a period that had great merit. And if we in all of us, you, me, everybody, hadn't been doing something, maybe Doctor Who wouldn't have come back. Maybe because nobody would have perceived that there would have been anybody that interested to watch it. I mean, I always believed that Doctor Who would come back. I think it'll probably get rested again soon. Not necessarily in the next few years because the BBC has too much of an investment in it, but I do think it might get rested again soon.
yeah,
And I think it needs it for another rejuvenation.
yeah,
I think it needs the break. It
yeah,
just needs new, and not being negative about any of the people that work on it now, but I think it just needs new blood,
yeah,
like Star Trek needed it at the end of Enterprise. It just needed that little breather
yeah.
for new people to come in and take over.
Yeah. And I think that what's the issue with having when you compare the differences between the Doctor Who during the wilderness years and having Doctor Who now is that the issue you've got now is that every piece of information about Doctor Who is now being leaked onto the internet, like knowing about the fact there was multiple endings to Reality War or there's multiple scripts being written. And I think that's the problem with Doctor Who at the moment. Is me personally, I don't want to know there's multiple scripts of the Christmas special written. I want to just watch what's been written. I don't want to know that there's multiple outcomes because then that would annoy you. Be like, well, I don't like that. Well, what were the others? Or there's multiple versions of Reality War. I didn't want to know there was other endings because I think that sort of spoils it slightly because it's like, well, what was the other end? I want to know, and all that hoo-ha then occurs. So I think that if Doctor Who was to be rested it again, like you've suggested, I think that if we just don't talk about any of the commotion behind the scenes and just leave that alone, it would give the show a better future because it's like less so, oh, look at what happened there. Look at some incident that occurred, or the fact that they're blaming Russell for doing such a thing when that probably wasn't the official case. It's probably just some journalist getting the wrong end of the stick because they've misinterpreted. And do you think that that's the issue with current the way Doctor Who is perceived now?
I don't think you can, and I know you're not, but I don't think you can apportion, shall we say, blame
Mm,
to people. I think the world has changed. I mean,
yeah,
I think the best period in Doctor Who's history, from the point of view of the production team being able to get on with making it, and they weren't thinking in terms of anything other than just making Doctor Who,
yeah,
was probably Pertwee, when you had Barry Letts and Terence Dicks just making Doctor Who.
yeah,
They were just making it. It was a program. Obviously, there was Hartnell and Troughton before, but
mm,
I think the mix during Pertwee of what Barry and Terence, I can call them Barry and Terence because I knew them personally,
yeah,
did was unique. And I think so a very good friend of mine once said to me, and I can't remember which story it was, but he said Doctor Who was a series that just was made by people who just made television until it became self-aware.
yeah,
And the moment it became self-aware, which was sort of like, I think probably midway through perhaps Tom Baker,
mm,
and started looking at itself
yeah,
and looking and judging itself and looking at itself other than just being made
yeah,
as a program, is when it started to go wrong, and it started to lose its identity. And I think it got worse under John Nathan Turner. And not blaming John for that, but saying that it got worse during John
yeah,
Nathan Turner. I mean, we were all hearing what was going on behind the scenes during Ian Levine's time working on
yeah,
working within the program structure, and all that went on. We were all hearing about it while it was going on.
yeah,
But I don't think anybody can be blamed for this. It was the change of the way that society is run by,
yeah,
internet, by fandom, which really grew during and I'm to blame for that in many ways. One of the people in the 1970s through to the 80s and beyond. And nowadays, as you quite rightly say, it is no longer possible for it to function just as a production and just get on with making television.
yeah,
But I do think that there is an element of the people who make the program should just make the
yeah,
program. They should forget about who might find things out. They should forget about making statements about their own personal beliefs.
yeah,
They should make a program that is entertaining, and where messages are wanted to be conveyed, they should be not thrust in your face.
yeah,
They should be part of the story and not something that is the coach you hang the hook you hang
yeah,
your coat on for
yeah,
the entire production.
yeah,
And I think this is why a lot of not just fans, but a lot of the audience have drifted away.
mm,
Nobody likes to be preached to,
yeah,
who by giving the impression that you are superior to the audience. And I think that's the biggest problem. Tell a good story, and if other things are told within that story that you want to tell, all well and good.
mm,
And that's always been a personal belief of mine.
yeah,
And I'm not having a go at anybody because they are suffering
yeah.
from the society we live in now.
Yeah, and I think that the message there to tell a good story, I think, is the message in not just Doctor Who, but just in general. Because
Oh yes,
I
yes,
I
yes.
think I think that if you look at the new series, and I did a review about this, and I really loved it. And the story in the engine makes it clear that everyone's got a story, and I think that that's the message that not just Doctor Who, but everything should give off. That everyone's got a story, no matter what it is, it's worth telling. Not some parts of people's lives might not be worth wanting to be told because of certain incidents that might have occurred, but a lot of things have stories. And I think that when you look at the catalogue of fan work and work in general, you can tell that there's every avenue in every part of not just Doctor Who, there is something to tell. And I think that that's what makes real time really interesting from my point of view, is that you find characters that have got a story that might not have been explored in full. Just like Syl, you wouldn't have thought in a million years that you would want to know more. But then when you see that, you think, actually, that makes the character a lot better. So when I go back to watch that story, I'm like, I've now empathized with the character rather than go, that's the villain. I mean, I'll never empathise with the Candyman spelt with a K and on a C due to the fact that he does look ridiculous, and that's incredible. It's one of the weirdest monsters of all time because he is just a load of sweets. Um, endless, endless
So
ream of gags that you can come up with.
funnily enough, we've just finished. I'm literally just finishing Rob Alsop's Myth Makers at the moment,
Wow.
and of course he built the Candyman.
Yeah.
So everybody, hear the story from Rob Alsop, what he
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah. And throughout this interview, you've mentioned about meeting these people in the world of Doctor Who and interviewing them, and I think that you sort of get the person a lot more when you interview them away from the limelight, the people that knew the story best. And I think, from my point of view, because I've done a documentary and I interviewed Stuart Fell, and he's such a wonderful person,
Yeah.
and I can say something nice thing, but this isn't the format to say that. But having interviewed someone on that level where it's like you learn more about him, and not only do you learn more about him in the recording, but then afterwards have that general conversation. Do you think that
Mm.
that's what makes Doctor Who special for you? Is because you make these myth makers that are these really beautiful interviews. Do you think that you not only understand the person from a Doctor Who point of view, but you understand who they are generally to get the where their passion lies, and you feel more of a connection to that person and who they've played or what they've worked on within the production of Doctor Who.
Um, I would say I'd take Doctor Who out of the equation, to be honest, and
Yeah,
just say I like people.
yeah,
Not all people, but
yeah, yeah,
normally,
yeah,
I can't say I dislike anyone, not
yeah,
dislike, but obviously you meet. I mean, if you're doing an interview, you are going to get a range of people. I mean, we will get to 200 myth makers in the
yeah,
next couple of years, which is it sounds like it's me. It's not. It's everybody that's worked with me on it. But it's an incredible achievement. It's an utterly incredible achievement. And during that time, you've met virtually every kind of
yeah,
personality. From people who I'm not going to name names, but people who just come along. They're terribly professional. They do the interview. They
yeah,
go away, and they don't give you anything to illustrate the interview.
yeah,
You go to the other extreme of people who are just so pleased. So what you find is you'll get this gamut of people when you've been doing so many interviews. You'll go from somebody who has helped you immensely and given you hundreds of photographs. No, actually, I'll do it the other way around. A gamut of people. You get the person who is very professional, does the interview,
yeah,
goes away, doesn't give you anything, any material to go into the interview. You never talk to them again.
yeah,
That's one extreme. And the other extreme is you get the person who's absolutely over the moon that you've interviewed them, really feel they've been privileged to do it, and will dig out every photograph from their life.
yeah,
Invite you around for coffee afterwards, and you become friends.
yeah,
Um, Everybody's different, and you meet just like you do in normal life. You meet those people that you really get to know and become good friends, and those that pass through your life like a ship. And I'm just very lucky. I've met so many people. That's all I can really say.
yeah. And I can sort of echo that in the sense of when I made this documentary, which is the most ambitious thing I've done in my life. It was for my final year at college. I mean, everyone else was doing student. I'm not saying student work's bad, and I'm not saying student work's brilliant either. And but like they've all done dramas or they did such a thing and they wrote the parents in and whatnot. And I decided let's do something original. And I decided to I tried to make my own version of what I would perceive as a collection box set style documentary because I would thought, well, that's a goal, let's achieve it. And I live up north, so it's like a trek to get down south, and everyone, I don't know why, but they all live down south. So it was like a
Don't start that debate for
no,
God's
no,
sake.
it was like a bus. I didn't even know how you get down south because I don't drive. So, well, obviously you drive, but I wouldn't know it. I wouldn't know down south off a map, because I don't know much about maps either. But the point is that when I interviewed Dean Rose, who owns a replica version of Bessie, and it was what Chris Chapman had used for some of the
Hmm.
things. once we discovered he had a TARDIS in his back garden, that was another ball game altogether. Because obviously, as a fan, I then had to go and faff around and film just random bits inside a TARDIS to create other things that were separate away from the college work, which is slightly not what you're probably supposed to have done, but I had too much
Well, I
fun.
mean,
But you sort of get the
it has
connection.
value, whatever the
Yeah,
subject matter is.
yeah,
You're doing your study course. The
yeah.
fact that you get something out of it at the end that you can exploit, I'm well onto that.
Yeah, and you sort and that connection built because then we went in because then I generated a whole separate film, and then we saw his other rooms, and it was amazing. The more to what you were saying is you sort of grew that connection because it was like I was interviewing for a purpose, but then see what the rest of outside of the sole bit I was there for, you sort of learn more about the person and you see the passion and
Mm,
you see that there's more to the person than just what you get and that's what I think is really interesting about interviews, not just in a sense of Doctor Who, but in a general sense of interviews in a sort of a passionate way, like what we do, rather than if you look like Michael Parkinson, he probably didn't have enough time to know the people to the extent that you would in a because he's up against the what the editors need, what the
yeah.
BBC want, and that's not a problem. That's his way of that's a version, but
Well,
the way that we do, we've got that time.
it's broadcast television. You
Yeah,
have an hour slot and you need a number of guests, and the
yeah,
audience aren't going to want to just have one person unless that one person is
yeah,
incredibly famous or incredibly charismatic. I mean, when we started Mythmakers in '84, the BBC weren't doing any VAM material, value added material, special features, whatever you want to call it. Um, and what we were doing was utterly unique. So the BBC were just starting to bring Doctor Who out on VHS, and we were doing Mythmakers, and Mythmakers was the only way, other than
yeah,
conventions, that you would actually get to hear an actor talk about, or a
yeah,
production person talk about their lives.
yeah,
And at that time, it was unique. Even now, when we're flooded with VAM material on every Blu-ray, DVD, and of course, when the program is being made, programming about the program going
yeah,
out on TV
yeah,
virtually
yeah,
immediately, the some of the value of what we do is not there anymore. And I certainly am not planning on heavily moving into doing Mythmakers on New Who personalities because they've all been interviewed to death. And I mean that without detriment to anybody.
yeah,
Um, but what we do still is unique
yeah,
because what we do is we give one person the space and time to tell their life story,
yeah,
not their Doctor Who story, which is that tiny bit there.
yeah,
And what we've got is an utterly unique library of making of people and actors and production staff of British television, in that really right through from the 60s through to the 2000s.
yeah,
We have a history that one day I think will be something that will be of great value. The other great thing about real times production I'm sorry, it sounds so, arrogant to say it, but, we have myth makers, we do the dramas, but the
yeah,
other thing in the middle is all the single documentaries,
yeah,
the ones which simply would never be made by the BBC. Return to Devil's End, of course, is something that the BBC has copied in many
yeah,
ways since then. But things like Who on Earth is Tom Baker?
yeah,
Um, the Doctor on Display series, which we've just finished with the USA tour, the
yeah,
BBC would make a small little documentary about
yeah,
it, but they would never be able to, and understandably so, I'm not
yeah.
critical of it, they couldn't do the 6-part series, 7-part series that we've done.
Wow.
Um, Day of the Daughters, where we
Yeah.
took Sadie Miller and again, names are going out my head, and Nick Briggs, the
That's
two
plenty of
daughters
hours.
of Elizabeth Sladen
Yeah.
and Carrie John,
Wow.
back to the locations for some of their stories, and interviewed them about growing up with their mothers,
Yeah.
losing their mothers early in life, really, and then taking on the roles that they both portrayed.
Yeah.
Is no way anybody would think of doing that, and it's so
Incredible.
ephemeral to Doctor Who itself, but I think again adds something to the universe of
Yeah.
Doctor Who. without sounding too pretentious. I mean, something like Day of the Daughters, where we actually took Sadie and Daisy back to one of the locations that their mothers filmed at and spoke to them about their mothers, Caroline John and Liz Sladen. And actually, Nick Briggs was talking to them about growing up with their mothers and the fame that they had, and then their tragic deaths, living with that, and then reprising the roles that they played.
Yeah.
You know, which is an incredible story. And I'm very proud we did that. And that's very ephemeral to the history of Doctor Who, but it is something, a story that I think we needed to tell.
Yeah, and that just to me as a sort of I don't know what the word is. I've learned the word, but it's like it's a sort of fan that doesn't just sit by and watch it. They get involved. I can't remember. There's a word for that. That shows how much I remember that.
That's all right. I know how you feel. It's
Uh,
been a long day.
yeah, well, yeah, it's been a long life.
Not as long as mine, sunshine.
and so it's one of those things where you watch it and think that to me that sound, and I can sort of picture, right, what it would look like, and that sounds incredible, right? And I think that's what makes, I think, that Doctor Who special, is because of Big Finish utilizing family connections sometimes, not always, sometimes, to utilize the actors to portray their family members in that role. It showcases that the role means something to the actors and to the audience, because the audience will go on board with the fact that they're now listening to the next evolution of Sarah Jane Smith. Even though you know in your heart you won't replace Elizabeth Sladen, but you know that this is the next best step. It showcases that is that she's portraying the role not just because it's a role, but she's portraying it of an homage or a sort of recognition of the work that Elizabeth Sladen did to make this character who she is. And when 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 looking back at what you've got for Being the Doctor, do you sort of see that there's another side to these people that most fans won't have seen anywhere else?
Yeah, I think certainly the productions that we do
Yeah,
show, I think, show the personalities of the people we're interviewing, perhaps in a better way. Although I think some of the BBC VAM material on the Blu-rays is incredibly good as well. So I'm not crowing that we do better, but certainly we're able to focus on smaller things,
yeah,
perhaps, than and make it a bigger story than they are able to within the
yeah,
formats that they have. I mean, I think what it's, again, it's not unique, but Doctor Who is in many ways a family.
yeah,
Doctor Who, over the years, the family relationship between, and in many ways, this is part of what we were saying about the way things have changed, that so much information is out there,
yeah,
is that, you know, you now have a blurred life area between fandom and the people who make the program, the actors and the production staff.
yeah,
30 years ago, that wasn't the case. There were the people who made the program and there were fans, and that was a big difference. They were split. But nowadays, you've got people who were fans who are now making the program.
yeah,
Much more than when I was working on it. Now people who are actually heavily involved in actually producing it and making it. I don't have an opinion whether that's good or bad. It's just the way it is, and it's bound to have happened because you've got fans
yeah,
growing up and knowing that they can get into the business and wanting to work on the program. And I think there's that you will learn more because the actors and the production staff are far more open to knowing, shall we say, that they're going to go into a situation where they're going to meet fans. You know, culturally it's all changed so much, you know, with all the big television programs and Star Trek and films like Star Wars. You know that you're going to do Comic-Cons, you know you're going to do conventions. It is true, and I'm sure most fans would appreciate this, that and I can say this in a little way because of
Yeah.
my little tiny celebrity status and not being real. No, I mean that.
Yeah.
I am not important, but I am little tiny celebrity. That you can't be totally yourself all the time when you do events because you give too much, you get too exhausted.
Yeah.
You have to keep you back in a little bit and put a little bit of an image on. So, you know, even though you meet the famous people at a convention or at a signing, you meet them at a level that they can cope with it rather than really meeting the person. You know, it's very tiring, and at the end of the day, they'll go back to their hotel room or go back to their home and
Yeah.
just go, "Phew," and in my case, have a beer. You know, it's but I mean that's normal in human nature anyway. When you meet lots of people, you are giving out, and I think I hope that every fan understands that,
Yeah.
you know, that they do meet the person is giving them everything they can,
Yeah.
but they can't be on a total one-to-one basis. It
Yeah.
can't be because they've got the next person to meet
Yeah.
and the next person and the next and the
Yeah.
next. And I'm sure we all know that, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
I know that when I interview somebody
Yeah.
that, you know, it's rare that I will become a personal friend of that actor
Yeah.
or, you
Yeah.
know, it does happen.
Yeah.
But you know, in television generally, you tend to pass like ships in the night, and then meet again 5 years later and go hi, as though you'd never hadn't seen each other in a day,
Yeah.
not 5 years. It's the nature of the business, you know, and it's a healthy thing to understand
Yeah.
that, you know, everybody needs a bit of private space.
Yeah, and what I quite like is when you see those certain fans, there's a few online where they go to multiple events and see the same person, and you can sort of see the connection. So I think the great example, and I've interviewed her myself, and there's some great stories I could tell, but this isn't the forum for that. But Katie Manning, she is such a lovely person,
She
uh,
is.
and finding out that she's married to the person that made the Neighbours theme tune makes her even more incredible. Because obviously Neighbours is incredible as well. But what I think is interesting is when you hear about fans that have met her multiple times, and you can see that she is that even when I've interviewed her, she was really nice. But when you hear all these stories of like certain people meet her multiple times, it's like she is the loveliest person you can think of because she showcases that no matter what situation. And you're right, because there've been me like millions of fans in a day, and when you see the connection that she bonds with some fans, it showcases that no matter what situation, she'll still be the charming self. And I think that what's interesting about conventions in the world of Doctor Who in particular is it if you were in Doctor Who for 4 minutes, right, and you were like all the way over there, and you can then make like a fortune off going to conventions because a lot of people will know who you are. And I think that's what's brilliant about Doctor Who is that you can have another career outside of your acting because you could just go and sign autographs for a living because people will know who you are.
But
Right,
that's not just Doctor Who,
no,
remember
it's other
that
fans as well.
I would say that is you can't even say cult TV. It is a phenomenon of um there isn't really a word for saying it. It is that phenomenon of programming that is of a fantastic nature.
Yeah,
You know, if you think Star Trek, Doctor Who, any science, Battlestar Galactica, it
yeah,
doesn't really matter. Every sub, Blake Seven,
yeah,
Star Cops, you know, they for some reason they generate a following
yeah,
that most other programming doesn't. Some soap operas,
yeah,
you know, you can work in any of these programs for for a relatively short period of time,
yeah,
and it I won't say it would ever be a meal ticket, but I defy any actor to say that it hasn't become a relatively important source
yeah,
of income when things are quiet,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and before I move on, but one of the stories that I heard recently, and I didn't know this, but I need to go and rewatch it to sort of discover this further. But I don't know if you probably have heard of it because talked about enough now. But there's a fan series on YouTube called Doc DW 2012, right? And
Hmm.
they have a wide variety of stuff. They make a lot of Doctor Who fan thing that is. I can't remember the bloke's name, which is quite bad of it. But he's made like several different TARDISes in his back garden, right?
Mhm.
His mother let him do it in the first place, and now he does it of his own fruition. Anyway, but there's a woman that's in it who's now married to the creator of DW2012, and she had a small cameo as a unit soldier in the 60th anniversary, and in on the World of Fan Doctor Who YouTube, which were called WhoTubers, but the people that do high end fan films, she was also a companion in that, and it's incredible to see that there's even if you're making fan stuff for next to nothing, there's still a projection where you can then see yourself. Say, for instance, you say, "Oh, I want to be in the show." Eventually, you could be in the show as an extra, and it showcases that there's still that passion. And do you think that from your years of working, do you think that you can see that a lot of the work has been achieved through not just the hard work, but also the passion you've got for not only Doctor Who, but the production that you're working on?
Um, well, that's a long question. I think if I'm splitting the two between, not that I'm not a fan, I'm a fan, but if you split um me and, as I said, I'm like I walk in two worlds in an
Yeah,
odd way, because I am a fan, but I've had to approach everything that I've done as a professional,
yeah,
because it's the only way I could have survived 40 years and earn a living at what I
yeah,
do as well.
yeah,
So I think if you are a fan and you're not involved in it professionally, then you have the right to explore what you want to say, and live that life in
yeah,
any way you want. So if you are a creative fan, and there are many,
yeah,
and you want to make something, whether it's a book, whether it's a fanzine, whether it's digital, whether it's some kind of drama. Johnny Baines has been making
yeah,
dramas that are essentially his versions of Doctor Who,
yeah,
and he's done stories. I think as long as these things are not detrimental to the brand
yeah,
of Doctor Who, which the BBC do need to protect. They can't allow it to be undermined, and there is obviously sometimes within fandom a lack of understanding of that, because why would you, as a fan, look at the corporate image? But as long as it's all done for love, and it's done to enrich your own life, and Doctor Who as a culture, shall we say, what harm is there? From my point of view, I obviously had to approach it slightly differently.
yeah,
I couldn't I couldn't go into interviews thinking, um, oh, I'm going to be meeting John Pertwee today.
yeah,
Ooh, I can't. I've got to go
yeah,
in
yeah,
and say, well, we're interviewing John Pertwee today.
yeah,
And I suppose over the years, I've been, as I say, I've been lucky enough to walk two worlds. I'll go to a convention. I will not go to a convention thinking that I'm important,
yeah,
and people must pay for my autograph, or
yeah,
must treat me with some kind of. I prefer a fan like myself come up to me, sit down, buy me a coffee, or I'll buy them a coffee
yeah,
and have a chat, and that's great. That's all I'm interested in.
yeah,
But on the other side of it, I'll go to the green room and I'll walk in, and I'll be treated by actors as a producer,
yeah,
and sometimes get hit on for jobs. And but that's great. That's
yeah,
lovely to walk between those two
yeah,
worlds. And I consider that a privilege. I'm lucky. And but I think everybody has to follow their own star. If there's any
yeah,
point to what I'm saying there, follow
yeah,
your own star, and if you want it and believe in it, go for it.
yeah,
Don't ever let anybody talk you out of it.
yeah.
Do what you got to do.
And that is the perfect sentence. See, didn't always happen, but when it does, I strike the iron whilst on. That's the perfect sentence to end this wonderful interview on. Now, this part of the interview is your opportunity to tell people what upcoming projects are you excited for people to see, hear, taste, smell, all the senses, and all the ways they can consume the product. What project that you're allowed to talk about? Because obviously everyone knows NDAs are here, there, and everywhere. They seem a lot more in the world now than they were the last time I heard about them last Tuesday. But what upcoming projects can you share with the world that they'll be giggling and excited and
Giggling and excited, guys. Don't get carried away. Well, I mean, we've just released two new myth makers, David Howe and the writer and publisher, and Ian Levine, as previously mentioned. We have two more coming out in 2 weeks when I'm going to Carlisle Comic Con. So if anybody lives up around Carlisle in the north, up north, come and I can say that because I have northern blood. My family come from there.
Yeah.
Come to Carlisle if you can. Come to Comic Con and I'll buy you a cup of buy me a cup of coffee. And we'll have a chat. And Neil Cole's coming from the Museum of Classic Sci-Fi, and we're releasing, as well as having a screening, we're releasing two new myth makers, which will be Neil's myth makers and Rob Alsop's. In terms of the future, I am taking a break for a while from cult-related stuff because my wife and I have a couple of Greek language program series that we need to finish, and that is going to require 100% effort for about 6 or 8 months to get these two big series finished. So that's my other life. But we do have Tooth and Claw, which is the highlights of Neil Cole's event last year, and it's basically one man's guide to how to set up and run an exhibition. So that's quite nice. I often get approached by fans at conventions with ideas, and I have no problem with that. You got an idea, come and talk to me. If I sort of go, don't take it badly, because sometimes I'm just thinking, well, I can't got time to do that. I can't get the rights to do that, or it just isn't something I feel I can do. But someone came up to me, and he knows who he is, and I will find the name to send him a free copy. But he came up to me and said, Keith, you must have shot hours of material when you did Return to Devil's End. I said, yeah, we did. We shot, probably 7 or 8 times the actual material that was in the edit. And he said, I'd love to see all of that. I'd love to see the unedited rushes of what you shot over that weekend, those 3 days. And I went, I wouldn't mind seeing that. I haven't looked at them since we edited it 28 years ago or whatever it was. And I thought, God almighty, this was a moment in history. This was a moment in time. And I thought, right. So I went home, and I've actually done most of the work on it now, of putting all the rushes out in one edit. I've got to go back to Allborn with Nick Briggs to do some links to put it together, but that's another one that I hope will come out this year. At the moment, apart from that, I can't really say what's planned for the future. As I said, we're taking a break, but certainly Anomaly, the drama about why there were 2 Kate Lethbridge Stewarts, will hopefully be seen at some point.
So, where can we get all your stuff from?
Well, since you asked, Tom, yes, actually, all of our product is available as DVDs, Blu-rays, download and stream from our sales website, which is www.timetraveltv.com. And that was a terrible marketing plug, but I'm very grateful.
And so, there we have it. Another excellent interview by Mumwa. That's not me being narcissistic, but you can take it as that if you will. That's another poor joke down the pan. If we had a pan, it's more like it's more like a bin,
or a toilet, if you want.
Or a toilet. And yes, there'll be more interviews from me because I'll never stop until I drop. Yep, until I fall on the floor. Not die. Yep.
No, don't die, please.
No.
Not there. Not yet.
No, now. No. 4 weeks from now. No. Poor joke. Anyway, so thank you guys for watching. And remember, there'll be more interviews from me, and there'll be more stuff from me because I'm always doing things. That's why I run 33 YouTube channels and you don't, because obviously you're not as mad as I am. Question that is your own free will. But thanks for watching. Ta-ra, bye-bye, and tiddly peep. Bye-bye.
Don't forget to subscribe to the official Tom Mason YouTube channel.